Hey everyone, welcome. Dominic here, and glad to be joined by Monica Speach. Welcome, Monica. How are you?
Good, great.
So, we are on a quest to help you find the best fit for your homeschool life. This is the Catholic Homeschool Neighborhood. We introduce you to friendly creators and guides as you build your own homeschool neighborhood. I'm your host, Dominic de Souza, a second gen homeschool dad. And today we're joined by Monica Speach. She's the author of the PACE curriculum for grades K through 9, PACE standing for Program for Achieving Character Education. In just a second, we are going to get into all of that. First, I love that little intro. Okay, Monica, over to you. You had a short little fact, and then I wanted to ask you how you got into homeschooling. So, over to you.
All right. So my interesting fact was that I met my husband when I was 12 years old, which
How
is
did that?
kind of unusual. Um, we grew up in New Jersey in the same town, and right after he moved into town, he got to be friendly with a guy who I went to school with. So my husband went to public school. I went to the local Catholic school. We were out riding our bikes, and our friend Michael introduced us, and we played in the neighborhood together, and we played pickup football and basketball. I was a tomboy, and then I ended up going to the same high school. Ended up going to the public high school in town, and we started dating, and the rest is history.
That's incredible. Okay, so how did you get into homeschooling then?
So my husband was in the Navy for over 30 years, and we moved a lot. So when the kids were little, we had them in a Montessori school, which we loved. And then we moved to a little town in upstate New York. And it was a little difficult because my kids had really, I don't know if you know anything about Montessori, but you go at your own pace. And they were, my son was in first grade and he was reading on a very high level. And it was almost like they weren't moving along with my kids. So I was getting a little disappointed, and I started talking to some of the moms, and one of them said, "Oh, I have a friend who homeschools. Why don't you go talk to her?" So I ended up going over to this woman's house, and I met her kids, and I was really impressed. They were very comfortable talking to adults, and they were just very, very intelligent kids and had tons of interests. They were just doing so many interesting things. And then she really got me. She's like, "Yeah, we do like 3 or 4 hours of homeschooling a day, and then the rest of the day they get to do what things they want to do." So I said, "I am definitely trying this."
Okay.
So I did that, and then 11 years later, I finished.
Amazing. So, okay, so tell us about PACE. What is it, and what does it do, and how did it begin?
So PACE began when I started, really right after, about a year after I started homeschooling my kids, and I discovered the Book of Virtues by William Bennett. I bought it at the bookstore, and I loved it. And I said, I really want my kids to learn about virtue. I want them to be virtuous, moral citizens. So I liked the setup of it. I liked the 10 virtues that it covered. So I developed a program. It took me a couple of years, and it was basically just for my kids. But then we moved again. And when we moved to Virginia, a friend of mine came over to my house and saw the book on my table, and she's like, what's this? I said, "Oh, this is something I wrote for the kids." And she said, "Can I borrow it?" And she said, "You're crazy. You should be, it's exposing other people to this." I thought, "Oh yeah, but that might take a lot of work." So then I started thinking about it, and then people started asking me about it, and then I just kept adding to it, and I've had a couple editions, and now my son helps me write the workbooks for the upper grades.
Okay, so how did you find this book? Had you ever heard about it before, or you just picked it up and then a light bulb went off and
Right,
you created
exactly.
a program?
My dad was a teacher, and he was a reading specialist. And we had books like, my mother used to say the house is going to collapse. So many books. And then he worked for McGraw-Hill Publishing Company, so then he used to get free books.
Oh, okay.
So we just had a ton of books. So in my family, if a new book comes out, we just all tell each other about it. So my dad, I think, had read a review in the New York Times book review section, and he called me and he said, "You got to get this book," which he said to me probably, I don't know, 150 times, while I was growing up, and then, even more as I got older. Always, "You got to get this book." So I went and I bought it, and I read it. It has great stories in it, and it was fun. And I started reading it to the kids. And when I saw the way they reacted to it, I said, this is just a great vehicle because it's just a very natural way for kids to learn about virtue without pounding them over the head or saying, today I'm going to lecture you on the virtues. No one wants that.
Right, right.
So it was great because it just elicited all these wonderful conversations as a result. So as soon as I saw that, I said, well, yeah, there's going to be, we have to have a discussion component. And then, of course, I wanted my kids to write. And one of the great things is that because it's classic literature in this book, and also the Moral Compass, which is a book that William Bennett wrote a couple years later, and I also use in my program, it's classic writers, authors. So while the kids are reading this, they're picking up the grammar, the syntax, the advanced vocabulary.
Oh, okay. That
helps to make better writers. There's been a lot of research about that. I mean, I think everyone knows that. So I wanted my kids, and I'm thinking, well, this is stuff I want my kids to know anyway. These are stories that I want, and I wouldn't necessarily be able to, I had a lot of stories that I wanted to tell them, but there were so many more, and beautifully compiled in this book by William Bennett, who I actually did meet at a homeschool conference.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and he's like, so I put a face to the name, and we had a really nice conversation. And I was like, your mind works the way mine does, very organized. I like to have things in order. So yeah, so that's how it happened.
Okay, so you've structured a program. Is it for particular age group of kids? Because you mentioned you wanted them to do writing and not just the kind of learning and listening. So how does the program work?
So it works that kids are natural imitators. So if you expose them to good stories with characters, and they can be good moral characters, and they can also be ones who don't always behave the way
cautionary characters.
Yeah. So kids eventually, after you read to them, like when they're little, you read them to them and you ask them some basic questions. But as they get older, the more exposure they have to it, the habit forms, and then they start imitating those behaviors, which is why it has to be something that's very consistent. So when they're younger, it is originally geared towards kindergarten through 6th. But then as some of my family member, my customers, I call them my family members because I feel like they're part of the PACE family. They started saying, oh, do you have anything for junior high? Because, my kids need it even more in junior high because now they're starting to be faced with some dilemmas, and issues and bullying and all these different things that are happening. So more recently, in the past 2 years, I've developed a 7th, 8th, and 9th grade workbook using the same 10 virtues that are in the original manual. And just not as structured, because as kids get older, they have more classes that they have to take and things like that. So yes, when they're little, there's some drawings for the younger kids, the kindergarten, 1st grade. Parents will be reading the stories to the kids. I also give an extensive recommended book list that's in the manual. So after you finish reading the stories, you can also take books out of the library and read more about that virtue. I collect books, oddly enough. I love children's literature, so this is a lot of fun for me. So it is geared towards right now kindergarten through 9th, and I'm hoping in the next couple of years, if my son gives me some of his time, that I will add 10th, 11th, and 12th. I have some really, really exciting ideas for that. So I'm excited.
Brilliant. So what kinds of families really resonate with your program, the ones who really get the most out of it?
Yeah, I would say it really is, it's applicable to really anyone who wants their children to develop good moral character. It doesn't have it's not like a specific demographic, it's all backgrounds, all cultures. Actually, right now, the program is being used in Mexico in a bilingual homeschool school. So they give all of the materials to the families. So obviously they speak English because my program's in English. And so, I really do, and I sell around the world. I've sold this to people in different countries. The only thing they need is to be able to read English. And so I just think it's really geared towards parents who want to help their kids develop good character and be able to read and write fluently. And it does help. I've gotten a lot of emails over the years from parents who say, when my child was developing a bit of a, struggling with a particular behavior, it can really help with that. So, for example, like bullying, and you can talk to kids about compassion, and you can show stories about compassionate people. I also recommend movies and artwork and music in my program. It has a lot of stuff, but it also has a very practical component.
Mm-hmm.
So I really try to emphasize the practical application, because we want our kids to see, okay, we're reading the story, we're talking about it, we're writing about it, but what do I do with it? How do I use it?
Right.
How does it become part of my life? And so that's the goal.
That's awesome. How can people get in touch with you, Monica? Where can they learn more about this?
So I have a website, which is www.catholicpace.com. It has you can purchase the foundational manual, all the workbooks that go along with it. I have a couple of free lesson plans. I have banners, and I also had a lockdown book list at the beginning of the pandemic, which was really fun to put together. I think I have a Lenten book list on there. I don't know if I have an Advent. And I did a couple of blog bits, but things got a little complicated last year. Both of my parents became sick and passed away, so it got a little.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, so it was a little bit of stuff going on, but I want to get back to that because I really enjoyed. I liked writing the blog pieces.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Okay, so I'll make sure that's in the show notes. CatholicPace.com, CatholicPace.com. And well, in wrapping up, Monica, if you had 1 minute to share a message from one homeschooling parent to all of the many others who are out there, what would you say to them?
Well, I've been thinking a lot about time lately, and I really do think that there's a lot of wasted time. Obviously, people, there's just so many things that are keeping our minds busy, especially our phones and our computers. And one of the things what I loved about homeschooling was that I had this extra time I had special amount of time with my kids, much more than my peers. And it's such a blessing. And what I would say, my message would be, take advantage of that time that you have with your kids, and have those moral conversations with them that most parents want to have, but don't find time to do, because those are the conversations that are going to help build a really strong relationship with you and your children. And through those conversations, they will learn what you value most. And then they will in turn want to emulate those, and use those values and have those as part of who they are.
Beautiful. I think that's beautiful. Wonderful. Thank you again, Monica, for joining us.
You're welcome.
For those who are catching the replay on this, if you enjoyed this episode, share it with the one friend that you think would like to hear more about what Monica is doing. And then come and join us in the free homeschool community on CatholicHomeschoolCommunity.com. Thanks again, Monica. We will see you all in the neighborhood.
You're welcome. Take care. God bless.